Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Next Stop Automation, the podcast where we talk to people from the logistics industry about wins, challenges, and the future of operations. Today, with me is someone who has traveled almost all the world, has gained significant experience in the logistics industry, and is now offering his consultant services to companies who want to prepare for being for the sale. Welcome, Robert Masters, to announce his full name, Robert Masters.
Thank you, Constantine. It's a pleasure being here.
It's good to see you as well. We've talked several times before. We had a couple issues with doing this, but now should be fine. So today we're going to find out a little bit about what is the difference between a company and a company, and what does it look like to prepare for making the sale, and what can you do today to get a little closer to that. So if you're a business owner running a company or owning a company, listen closely. So Robert, could you tell us a little bit about what you have experienced so far inside the logistics industry?
Sure. So let's start with the owner of a company, a founder. Um, it is very common that a founder is going to start a company. He doesn't intend to sell the company. It's a lifestyle experience for him. He's 5, 10, 15, 20 years into it. There is a statistic out there. I talked to you about it before. Um, and I believe 95% of founder owned companies never sell. A high percentage of those don't even go to the children, right? So just because you've started a company doesn't mean your kids want to do what you do. And even if the idea of selling occurs, what we as founders, and I have been, what we tend to do is we want to sell our company when things aren't going well because we're feeling bad about it. We're feeling bad about the days. Maybe we've lost some customers. Maybe the economy's in the tank. And that's when we start thinking about selling. And then, of course, the next year comes and things are going great. And growth is at 25 or 35%. I don't want to sell now. This is fun. And so they go through these ups and downs over their entire career, if the idea of selling even occurs to them, and they pass on selling when the opportunity is really best. And founder-owned companies tend to have a couple of significant issues with selling. For example, the founder is the gatekeeper of all knowledge, right? He built this himself. He loves the business. He knows everything. And so what you end up with is maybe a company of 10, 15, 20 employees, but all the knowledge is tribal knowledge. It's the things that they've learned as they went along and grew. It's not things that are documented. So they don't have documented processes, maybe. Well, that's not a very attractive company to buy, because if I'm going to buy it and the founder leaves, I now lost all the knowledge. I now just have a shell. And another thing that they may do is they may not have good professional financial systems in place. They've got their finances fine. They're making money. They're profitable. Um, I knew a founder, for example, making $1 million a year, $1.2 million a year, he would be able to take out of his company for his lifestyle. Well, that's fantastic. He took a paycheck, plus every year he took 100, one and a half or $1.25 million. It's but he was paying all of his bills, and he was financially reporting all of his income on a cash basis, which is to say, as opposed to accrual. In an accrual accounting system, you say, I made $100 on this shipment. I have an expense for $50 for that shipment, and my profit is $50. But you don't you count for the $100 when the cash comes in, and you account for the $50 expenditure the next month when you pay the bill. And so it's very hard to get a grasp on cash accounting, whereas accrual should say, in this month I have $100 and I have a receivable, and in this month I have $50 I owe, and that's a payable. Two different accounting processes. One you can sell the company with, the other one you can't. Or you have to fix it before you can sell. So you end up in these situations where you have poor financial systems, you have undocumented business processes, are reliant on the people that are there to stay, including the founder. And then the third most common issue is concentration. Because the founder has started his business, he's likely the best salesman. He's likely the guy who has the relationships with the customers. And more often than not, because he's one guy, he has the relationship with the one or two customers that make up 50 to 70% of his business.
Sure.
So think about yourself as a buyer. I'm going to buy a company. The founder's going to leave, but he has all the relationships, all the tribal knowledge, and the employees are probably tightly aligned with him. So I now run the risk, which, by the way, buyers are most concerned with risk, and they're mostly risk averse, particularly private equity. So buying a company that has high concentration, if I lose the two customers, company's dead. If I lose the founder, which by design I plan on doing, the company's dead. Um, and so what we want to do is prepare companies for sale, regardless of whether they're going to sell, because a company is stronger when it has good processes, good financial systems, and low concentration. So we focus on those three things, and low concentration is repaired not by getting rid of the founder or selling the company. It's repaired by getting more customers. So we focus on operational processes, documenting, maybe improving, financial processes that are professionalized, and then marketing that allows the company to expand its customer base so they're more attractive to the marketplace in the event they choose to sell. And in doing that, we make a stronger company regardless.
Mhm.
Even if they choose not to sell, they become a stronger company, which, by the way, defeats me in part of this, because my goal is, in fact, to work with private equity to buy the company. So more likely than not, during my consultations, prepare them never to sell rather than to sell. But I think it's very important for founders to understand that, again, 95% of them are likely to have their business die when they do, or die when they retire, because um, they don't likely sell. They most likely get to a point where they become tired, the company becomes stale, and then it just fades off into the wilderness.
What a sad story, but it makes sense what you say. And what I can hear out of that is that you are the guy that brings order to chaos by implementing systems that ensure proper workflow. Is that right?
That's precisely what I try to do. The well, another very important thing is I personally have a business philosophy that is um, IT-centric, which is to say, we want, whether it's off the shelf or customized systems in any organization, that will automate the mundane, that has the processes for running the business built into them. And that makes designing processes and managing processes easier, because just working with the system, you by nature then follow the business process, and it's all documented within your IT infrastructure.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Now, what's the first point or the first field you look at when working with such a company?
Customers. First,
It's the
the
customers.
first, yeah, the first and most important thing. In fact, let's think of a business this way. Um, we start by defining, when we create our own business, we define it whether we like it or not. We define it by its position in the market. We may do it poorly, we may do it well, but we don't have a choice. It's defined. I'm doing this thing. I'm doing it at this level of proficiency, and I'm going to announce to the world who I am, what I'm doing, and how proficient I am. So the the customer is not first. The business comes first. Without the business, there are no customers. So So we define who we are, we define who we're going to serve, and effectively, marketing and sales are promises made.
Mhm.
We're telling people who we are, what we do, and how proficient we are at providing that service. Operations then is promises kept. So having an operation that is efficient, efficiency does a couple of things. It provides a, a, a continuum of service. It's consistent level of service, and it provides our profits. Right, an efficient business allows us to do business profitably. So we want an efficient business operationally, and we wanted a business then that is customer focused. Our marketing and our operations go should be working hand in glove. In fact, marketing, sales, operations are a continuum for the customer. They get a promise made. The salesmen are keeping the promise that marketing is making. They're just making it more tactically, and then operations is keeping that promise. When operations fails, it actually is it's making marketing and sales liars, and they should really see it that way. So the goal of operations is to run efficiently, but it's also to focus on the customer and the customer experience above all else. So my first role when going into an organization is to meet with the customers to learn, are you in fact having the promises made kept? And if we have a misalignment between what operations is performing and what sales or marketing are promising, we have to realign those. We either stop making those promises or we become proficient at actually keeping them.
Mhm.
So we always start in the operate or I'm sorry, with the customer to learn whether or not they're getting what they expected. Then we back into the operations and we realign it with the promises made, or we move into the marketing and realign it with the promise, or I'm sorry, the promises made and operations with the promises kept. Um, so we start with the customers, move back into operational process flows, look at IT solutions if they're not there and if they're necessary. And then we go into the finance. And finance is usually done not through me directly, but through a third party. Bring in a fractional CFO, for example, someone who maybe works with 5 different companies, but has CFO level experience and can put together those business processes, financial side of the business processes, and all kinds of. There are little things people don't think about. For example, um, no one within the organization should both be able to create an invoice and pay an invoice. That should always be 2 different people for the purpose of making sure that you don't have someone in your accounting department who is creating false invoices and writing the check to pay themselves. And those are things that large companies do by nature, small companies don't. So you get into that, you put in, not just good financial reporting systems, but financial management systems.
Okay, makes sense. Order to chaos, systems in place, and control to manage all of that. Okay.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that along the journey, when you start working with someone who's preparing to potentially sell their company, they start to feel comfortable. They start to feel the joy. They eventually don't really want to sell anymore, even though they maybe considered that before. What changes inside their brain? I think this is a whole thing about beliefs and yeah, basically in what position they are. So what is really changing along the process?
Unless you started your business with the intent to build it and sell it, you're likely to be a founder who just started the business because he likes doing it, or she who likes doing this thing.
Mhm.
And so you don't prepare for it. And the times you want to sell it are when it's no longer fun. The times you think of selling it are when you realize you could make six, I'm making a million, I'm taking home $1.2 million, but I could take home a single check of $6.5 million. And if I take that 6.5 million, I can do other things other than doing this business. I can invest that in ways that make it, turn it into 18 million. Or I can sell half of my company, and instead of taking $1.2 million out of it, I take $3 million up front, but I still have the business and I have capital from the private equity firm to make it grow faster. I get intelligence, I get advice, I get consultants to come in and teach new marketing programs. And so, oftentimes, what a business owner, a founder, can do is take half the money off the table, let someone else run the company in a way that's more. I don't want to call founders unprofessional, but let's just say more organized and, in fact, more professionally. And some companies that exist for many years at a certain size can see phenomenal growth with small changes. What what are financially small changes, but are actually large organizational changes.
It's an interesting point. I
I can
have
give
this
you an
myself.
example from our past
Yep.
conversation when we were talking about focused marketing, right?
Mhm.
Finding a niche in the market that is not underserved but underclaimed, right? That nobody owns yet. Nobody says they do it. In transportation, um, there is there's no place in the market that's not served, right? If someone has to get something somewhere, they get it there. They may get it there inefficiently, expensively, not in a timely fashion, but it's being done. Um, Years ago, I did a proposal for a catalog sales company, back before the internet. And I saw in his catalog that he was selling furniture amongst other things. And he had he was delivering all of his products in the catalog within 3 days using UPS and FedEx. But if you buy furniture out of his catalog, it was taking 20 days, right? So it's not that he couldn't deliver furniture, he just couldn't do it at the same level of proficiency that he was doing all of his other deliveries. Um, but if a transportation company could focus just on the delivery of furniture and do it fast and do it in home, they could have killed it, could have knocked it out of the park back in 93. Uh, it, it may or may not have been possible. Actually, it would have, but nobody owned that niche, even though it was being served. So it's not underserved; it's under claimed. And so once a company claims that high speed home delivery market, they can go from being 3% growth to being 45% growth only by taking that small segment of the transportation market,
Mhm.
claiming it for their own, taking leadership, and taking ownership of it.
So business success is really about specialization on your field and making everyone know that, obviously.
I'm I'm a firm believer that specialization and focus is critical. And we can look at companies and think about this. I realize, between Europe and Asia, maybe I'm so U.S. centric when I speak. I may be getting out of hand, but in the U.S., what I think the top um, furniture soap is Tide, and Tide isn't a company; it's a brand. Procter and Gamble is the company.
Mm.
Procter and Gamble has dozens, if not hundreds, of different brands. In fact, you never go into a store and buy a Procter and Gamble product. They don't brand their company; they brand their products, so that each product specializes in its own niche. Right? Tide is for washing clothes. There isn't a version of Tide that washes carpet. They have carpet cleaner, but they have it under a different name. And so the identification and specialization in marketing is critical because of how our mind works. We don't like memorizing all of the various things that might fulfill a particular need. We want to memorize at tops. If it's an important category, we want to memorize three.
Yeah. Mhm.
For example, toothpaste. Can you name three brands of toothpaste? There are dozens of brands of toothpaste,
Yeah, of
but you
course.
likely can name two.
And now you challenged me. I was gonna say I could probably name 5, but now I'm doubting myself because in my head I cannot tell them at speed. So
It's an amazing exercise. If I said name five car brands, you could probably name five car brands, but that's a broad market. Now, if I said name three car brands that are SUVs,
done,
oh, hmm?
done. I
Can
can
you name seven?
probably because every car brand nowadays does SUVs, right?
Well, that's fair. That's fair. So, or then we could go mid-market sports car, right? It's unless you're very focused on a market, you're not likely to memorize more than one or two brands. Now, if you're a sports car guy, you might be able to name 10.
Definitely, I get the point. The thing about cars is one first, I'm a car guy, and second, we get so used to it because we use and see cars all day. So yeah, I think to a certain degree, everyone is kind of a car guy. Every lady is kind of a car lady nowadays.
So, so because of the way our human minds work, specialization is critical to growth because you want to be known for the market niche you fill, and then once you've identified that you can fulfill the market, you can solve the problems needed within that market, then you can use, instead of just advertising, which advertising is, telling people who you are, what you do, it's getting that top of mind name recognition, but it's not making them need your product. What you're doing now is you're simply saying, if you need the specific product I have, I'm it. I'm the one you need to come to. Then
Sure.
you use PR in all of its different forms to persuade additional people that they in fact have that need.
That is so critical. You know, and I can relate to that personally because in my mind, I had that belief that the bigger you want your company to be, the more services you should offer. But it's not. It's focusing still on that one problem you solve and making it better and better.
Yep.
And maybe
And,
targeting different industries within that share the same problem. But you shouldn't go, usually, you shouldn't go broad at first. You should grow one vertical as big as you can and then maybe diversify. Yeah,
as,
it's a
co-
great
as
success story.
companies grow, it's very common for them to fill a market and then say, well, now how do we? A great example would be Miller Beer in the 1980s. It was it. Miller High Life. Everyone drank Miller Beer. They had huge growth, and then they thought, you know what? Let's expand on our success and let's make a light beer. Okay, so they created. So instead of making a beer called Light, they thought we had this name recognition with Miller, so they made Miller Lite.
Mhm.
Their growth in Miller stagnated, and their growth in Light increased. In the end, Miller Miller Lite hurt Miller Beer. What they
Wow.
should have done was change the name, specialize a light beer as a completely different brand, and stuck with Miller Lite as the branded that it was.
And why is that? What do you think? Were people in front of the supermarket section where they offered those two beers and they had to decide what?
Advertising push. But what they did was when you diversify a brand,
Mhm,
when you expand it, you dilute it. There's a common term, right? Cadillac. We refer Cadillac for so many years was the best in its market, right? It was the highest quality car. It was the coolest. The rich guys drove Cadillacs, and so we then even started using the word to refer to other products, right? That's the Cadillac of beer. That's the Cadillac of shoes. That's a Cadillac of suits. We used it because it denoted its own high quality image. It meant quality. And then in the late 70s, they came out with a new car. They thought we want to expand our customer base from just people who can afford Cadillacs. So let's make a mid-size car. We'll call it the Cimarron.
mhm.
And they made a Cimarron. They made a mid-size crappy car and put Cadillac's name on it and diluted the brand Cadillac into a mediocre brand.
Mm, that's sad as well.
Your brand image should be, and this is the thing with marketing and specialization, is it requires an extremely high amount of discipline. Even companies like Cadillac couldn't maintain that discipline.
It's insane. I was just thinking about how that big company even made mistakes along the way.
Many of them do.
Now,
And it's from changes in personnel. It's from not having uh, your top level executives disciplined enough to maintain and protect the brand. And when you lose the people who will protect the brand and you bring in new marketing people with new ideas, oftentimes they don't recognize the value of protecting the brand. And we can come up with a couple of great recent examples. One would be Budweiser, um, not recognizing that they have a customer base and changing their marketing. So they were going after a different customer base and having their existing customer base walk away from the brand. Um, who else just did it? Jaguar. Jaguar did the same thing with a weird commercial having nothing to do with their customers, having no focus on their existing customers, having a focus on now a new customer. And what's going to happen is your existing customers are going to go, I don't even know this brand anymore.
makes sense. It kind of ties in with the story or a lesson I heard, and it's the further you progress along the way, the more options you have to say yes to, but even more options you have to say no to. And the problem is, the further you go along the way, the better options these get. It is on the positive side as well as on the negative side. And it's quite hard for people, of course it is, to say no to really good offers or great opportunity.
Yeah, but there's also another part of this where you end up with a quandary, that is you bring in investors,
Uh-huh.
and the investors are owners. And so they want to have a say. And so when leadership wants to maintain discipline, but ownership wants to do whatever kooky idea is new in marketing today, now you have conflicts. And by the way, leadership can get fired by owners. So that discipline gets more and more difficult to maintain as you bring in more shareholders.
Interesting. Now, to recap this podcast episode, preparing for the sale is all about bringing systems in place and maintaining the discipline and going towards your active customers, asking them what you can do better and how you can maintain a healthy relationship for life. For someone who doesn't really want to get for the sale, but is still interested in personal and company growth, what 3 steps? Let's keep it in these three steps, since this is what our brain favors, right? What can you give them as a guideline? 3 steps to prepare for that sale, even though they don't really want to.
I will tell you the first step and the most important one is to start with the customers, and don't bring in the person who has the current relationship. You need to bring in someone else from the organization or someone who the customer would be comfortable responding to when asked this question. Why? Yeah. Why and in what ways
Mhm.
do we suck? Right? I don't want to hear how well I'm doing. I want to hear where I'm failing you. And take that feedback, go back to the organization. So you start with the customer, you go back to the organization, and you review your promises made and your promises kept compared to what the customer thinks. In fact, the customer likely has an expectation based on promises made. And so when they give you the list of two or three things you're really doing poorly, that's simply saying your operations isn't keeping the promise that's either made explicitly or implied in your sales and marketing. And so that 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 really is those are the 3 steps. You start with the customer, you go into your operations and your marketing, you see if your promises made and kept are in alignment with customer expectations. And that those are the 2 steps there. And then the third is you got to get your finances, you got to get your processes in order, both operationally and I mean documented and in order, professionalized in operations and in finance.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It was really interesting to prepare myself how to grow a company properly if you want to make a sale or if you don't want to, but it's a thing that is really growing yourself as a person, I guess. Now, for someone who really considers selling their company, where can they find you?
Um, I do want to say we have 2 minutes left. Um, oh, where can they find me? They can find me at our website, Global Cargo Holdings LLC. It's just globalcargoholdings.com. They can find me by calling me on my cell phone. I honestly, I can't even imagine why people do this, but they avoid putting out their phone numbers. I want calls. So I'll say it. My phone number is 1-612-619-4031, and I am always available.
If that's not a call. In that case, thank you, Robert, for being here.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Pleasure talking to you always, Constantine.